1. So hopefully you've looked at the course overview, and this week in this video, we're going to look at the first session and sort of some of the core concepts. I'm going to encourage you a couple of times to go check out all of the viewing material because I am the English side of this. I'm the person invested in literature and what we're doing with it and things like APA and plagiarism and how we come up with ideas and how we handle all of that. And the person doing those videos is the lawyer who completely understands a lot of those. So getting it from both sides, I hope will be really, really useful, but I want you absolutely to check out those videos. It is super important that you watch them. I would encourage you to watch them and then do your readings as well, because it will help you sort of refine and see what you're looking for. And then check out sort of mine as general overviews. So part of what I'm saying there is that there is what we should know versus what we should know of. So we are the people who are the creative side. We are writing, we are thinking of ideas, we are sharing the specifics of those ideas, and we shouldn't necessarily know everything about every possible topic. Think about all of the specialized skills in the world, the lawyers that we're just talking about here. And even then they specialize in things like copyright or family law and all these other different avenues. But we can't know everything about being a mechanic. We can't know everything about being a professor. We can't know everything about being a scientist or a physicist. So what we need overall is to know of things, to know about them. And we're reading a lot of incredible details. But I want you to be looking at it thinking not of how am I going to commit an entire book of entertainment law to my mind, but rather to say, okay, people are thinking about all the details. And if I have a general understanding, I'm going to know what sort of language to use. I'm going to know what sort of words to utilize in finding the right person and in making all of those connections. So think about it on the broad scheme. And we are going to talk today about some ways to approach the reading. So in our weekly overview, I tend to have a set sort of discussion element. Oops, something I'm not including today. Okay, so we're going to look at topic outcomes, readings and viewings, just to kind of give you more links to what those are and where they are, and look at the 3 assignments for today. I don't tell you like this is how to answer it. I try to give you ideas to help you get on track and to sort of front load you to being comfortable and confident about tackling them. If you ever feel like you want more information, I'm more than happy to do that with you, but I also don't like to sort of push everyone to reply in the exact same way that I would. That's part of what we do as writers and as thinkers. We are sharing sort of our perceptions, and that's what our discussions and submitted assignments are about. So our 3 topic outcomes for this session are to discuss preconceptions regarding the legal genre. That's our discussion thread. To explain copyright infringement and its defenses. Again, we don't need to know every single detail about this, but we kind of want a good idea. We want to process it. And to apply understanding by analyzing a fair use case. So we're going to look at those ideas and then we're going to say, well, in this sample case, our submitted assignment, what do we think? And again, there isn't one single answer. We could all come up with, yes or no, and it would be fine. We're exploring. We are testing those edges. So our first one, our preconceptions. Obviously, that's our discussion board, and we are looking at sort of where that's going. That's our discussion thread. So what if we begin with that first question? That first question was about our initial thoughts or ideas, like what is out there? What comes to mind when someone talks about a procedural and all of that? So what do we already know? What confuses us? These are the kinds of questions we're approaching. Maybe what makes you apprehensive or feel like you don't have enough experience when it comes to this side of writing. These are things that we want to start thinking about because they are things we're going to address. One thing I want you to keep in mind is that your work is tangible when it's written, but that process doesn't happen overnight. It is a process that is working over time, over quite possibly many years as you get more and more confident with your story ideas. So these are things that are really important because they are part of your process and part of your life and world because you have worked so long and hard on them. And that's what we are talking about when we are looking at copyright. We're going to look at it through a lot of sort of modern cases or things that we can all discuss because they could be sort of things we're all familiar with. But I want you to always think back about that particular idea, that your story ideas and what you share in your stories, your words and your language and your approach are not overnight things. They are things that you have devoted a lot of time and effort to. And that's what we want to protect. So, in tackling this kind of question, I want you to think about some of the basics: who, what, when, where, why, and how. The core W questions, although we add that H at the end. So let's look at some ideas. So who? Who is in this idea of the legal genre? Like who is part of a procedural? In my example, I chose Drop Dead Diva because I got a bunch of old shows to watch that I had missed way back in the day. A lot of times in the show, it feels very clear at first, like, oh, so-and-so has a problem, and, the plaintiff says, and the defendant is hurting them or is not telling the truth. But a lot of questions arise as we go through all of the details. Who is telling the truth? And then who is defending each party? Who is finding the truth? Who is navigating the way to justice? There are a lot of players involved here. We have our judges and our lawyers, but we have clerks and we have paralegals. We have so many people supporting them, experts. And the what? Well, what we're looking at in this course is civil litigation. It's not the same as criminal. We are often viewing criminal shows and writings, but that's not really what we're looking at. When we're looking at those, we often have a very clear idea of justice. One person murders another, and we say, well, justice would look like. Well, what does justice look like when someone takes an idea? When someone takes the work you have been writing and they take that copy and they publish it under their name. What does justice look like there? And how do we help people to understand how important it is? What about when? Law and Order often has dates across the screen, and that's supposed to help us understand that justice isn't swift, but the law affects all of us in many different ways, and we aren't going to necessarily see it happen overnight or quickly. We're going to see bits and pieces over time. And also, as you watch the videos that go along with the class, you'll see that we're talking about things like, oh, well, this was done in 1998, and well, a lot has changed since 1998 when it comes to, like NFTs and even YouTube and all of these kinds of things. There is so much that is quickly changing in the world of sort of creative idea and creative use and publishing. And so that when part is just kind of all over the place. And why? Why does it matter that we use someone else's work? Obviously, I tend to look at this from a plagiarism standpoint. That's really important to what I share and what I explore. But a lot of it is about the financial aspect. Who is benefiting from this in terms of money? And of course, that creative process is part of it. Who is taking what you've worked so hard for and getting some sort of either a financial benefit or just the benefit of everyone saying, oh, look how amazing you are. You wrote that wonderful work. It's a real tangible thing that we want to keep. Where are these things happening? Obviously, courthouses from the state to the federal, the Hague. I forgot to double check my spelling. I hope it's right. Then we have discussions in law libraries and classrooms. And of course, citizens. We have police, the lawyers, a legal clinic. Who are you going to as a citizen if you feel copyright infringement has happened against your work? Who are you going to if you get that letter that you have infringed on copyright? What would that look like, and who would we go find? And how? Well, for places like YouTube and social media, obviously they have a terms of service that we kind of click on too quickly, but that allows them to monitor fair use. And when it's bigger, the issues go to the where. So as users, they will just delete our content or block our content. But obviously, if it's a bigger and bigger issue, then suing it becomes part of it all. And I want to look at that in another one. Actually, I want to look at it here. So why do social media giants pursue status as publishers? Because that's a big part of this whole idea of like the how of what's going on with what legal genres are happening and what fair use looks like. Well, they want to maintain that publisher status because being a publisher moves the onus of fair use and copyright to you, the social media user, the author. If they were not a publisher, it would mean that they are liable for any copyright infringement that's shared on their sites. Can you imagine? I immediately think of all the quotes and all of the works and videos and everything that's shared quite freely. It's stitched, it's connected, or someone recopies it. For instance, YouTube has specific questions. When I'm enabling subtitles on my material, when I'm uploading it to my YouTube channel, it goes at and asks me about copyright. It says, is this, has this been used on TV? Is it within this date or that date? There are clear uses like, time frames, like 30 seconds of a song, paragraphs in a book, but more, that's when the line gets difficult. And as you see with our reading and with our videos, sometimes you can record a whole song or use a whole book, but we got to know the details to know when that's going to be okay. So stick to small works. Music companies have given algorithms to catch sounds for popular music to sites like YouTube, so they immediately run it through there and it checks it and it catches it. When I'm uploading, that's the third screen called checking, and it walks through that check and it sees what exactly is on there. A common thing that's happening now is that police are playing popular songs to prevent recordings going viral, because if you upload it to YouTube, it will say, oh, well, you're playing that song, and it won't look at the content. Also, we're looking at things like the news. McDonald's can't sue every time the golden arches are in the background, but that's where intent is coming in. Things like pictures in public are allowed. Whatever is on the main street, everyone can take a photo of it. We only need waivers and signatures and copyright when a photographer is going to make money off of all of that. A good example of this is A Million Little Pieces by James Frey. He couldn't sell the work as fiction, so he slapped a nonfiction label on it and ended up on Oprah's show. And that's when everyone said, wait, that really happened to you. Wow. Only it didn't really happen to him. And the fallout for that was tremendous. So in all of these, we're talking mainly about money, and we're talking about the intent. Like, are we being truthful? Are we just standing in front of a McDonald's because that's where an incident was happening? Or are we always standing in front of that McDonald's and talking about crime? Like, if the intent starts to alter or move or change, that's what we're looking at. So let's look at some of those pieces. If we're looking at copyright infringement and its defenses, check out the video. Obviously, it's the fourth video in today's viewings, but the plaintiff has to prove a lot of things. It was an original work that is copyrightable, and they've tried to get a copyright, and they own that copyright, and that the defendants have then copied it when it was protected. They have utilized the protected work in violation of that owner's rights. It is without permission, excuse, or defense. That is a lot. There's a lot of and, plus, and going on here. And that's why it does get tricky, which is why you see companies like Facebook and YouTube saying, we are publishers. It's up to those people who have put their individual works on the pages to stand up to this, because obviously you and I, as people just sharing a cute video, we're sharing songs and we're sharing all kinds of different things, and the intent on our side is just to spread something beautiful, and it isn't to do something wrong with it. And obviously we're not making money off of it either. So if we're going to look at all those ideas, we want to be able to understand how to analyze a fair use case. Does this mean we will always get it right? Just we will end up agreeing with the court and all of that? Maybe not. That doesn't really matter. What matters is that we're saying, okay, I'm going to look at these ideas and I'm going to try to process it. I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm starting to understand the language. I'm starting to understand sort of what directions it goes and how to explore it. So in The Essential Guide to Entertainment Law, which I've shortened there, they quote the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, all about our right to our work that we are creating, whether it's a science experiment or discovery, or that we are writing something. And then we have this dichotomy. We have this two opposite opposing sides in tension, and the courts have recognized, oops, I added a word there, that the copyright law has developed a systemic means of accommodating that tension. How are we going to let people have fair use, have their First Amendment, but also protect people who are using their words and exploring specific topics. How do we do both? Well, that's what the course have been working on. And if you check out the videos, you'll see that it's been literally hundreds of years of this, of finding that space and that line between, and that there's a lot of fluidity to it. There are obviously going to be cases that are very, very clear, but there are also times where we have to really push the boundaries and ask a lot of questions. That leads back to that YouTube idea. A lot of videos on YouTube are fair use. They are often challenged. Often you'll hear people talk about saying, my video got challenged because this, that, or the other. Well, some things to think about for us and the likes of us who are those kinds of end users. Is it demonstrably altered? So when we're looking at, if we go back to what I teach generally are plagiarism and paraphrasing and things like that. What I'm looking at to assess whether or not someone has plagiarized is not if they intended to do it necessarily, but I'm looking at it and I'm saying, when you use these words, are they unequivocally like the original? So what I tell people for paraphrasing is that I want you to take a book and turn it into a paragraph. I want you to take a paragraph and I want you to turn it into a sentence. I want you to take a sentence and turn it into a phrase. The reason I make those big spaces and those big leaps is because if I am sharing a paragraph in my own words from your paragraph, the chances of me mimicking your language structure, subject, verb, direct object, of me putting it into a really similar shape, but just, using the verb I like better, then I'm going to end up with plagiarism because it's really, really hard to go from a paragraph to a paragraph. But if I demonstrably alter it by paraphrasing it and really shifting it from a full paragraph to just a sentence, A, I have distilled the knowledge really, really well, and B, I am no longer anywhere near what the original person wrote in terms of completely mimicking them. Instead, I'm sharing them and I'm encouraging others to use them. So that is my sort of space in which I think about that copyright element. But also intention. It does matter on sites like YouTube, in the sense that we're looking at finance. So when I'm looking at a course paper or something like that, I'm not thinking about the intention in terms of money. But that's the intention we're looking at when we're often looking at professional works or works that are out there on social media. If you are driving viewers to your YouTube video, you will be paid. You will get compensation. If you're taking the Beatles' work and their work is driving viewers to you and you're profiting off of someone else's work. And so that intention part is going to become really, really, really important. There are obviously plenty of people who don't intend that. I didn't think about things like that when I started my YouTube channel. I don't include things like music, but it's something that slowly I've been like, oh, goodness, yeah, I don't want to do that. I don't want to drive viewers based on someone else's work. I want to drive viewers for my content to support my courses. And so I have to be careful because I don't want to just post all of the course content either. That doesn't belong to any one individual. It belongs to the university. So these are elements, again, that I'm always thinking about. So our readings are really intense, and I want to talk about what we're doing when we look at this entertainment law book, because it is really overwhelming for those of us who aren't lawyers. I noticed that every footnote pretty much was a law case, and I was like, oh goodness, I don't know what that is, but I can still get a lot from it. So I want you to look at some reading tips. Again, we are not doing this to memorize every law case. That's up to a lawyer. They will tell us what case represents what and what that means and what it's going for. Remember, you're looking for concepts. You're looking for the big ideas. We want you to be able to say, okay, I've been exposed to that idea and now I know where to go to understand or process. So I want you to be watching the videos first, and then I want you to skim what you're reading. Because that will bring it more into focus. And I want you to think about strategies. So I read with my pencil. And this is an example from something I was reading. I put lines to draw connections. I ask questions. I give definitions. So like if I'm reading and I don't understand a word or how it's used, I will write the definition in the margin, because for me, if by the time I look the word up and then I think about it and I come back and then I don't remember how it connects and I have to redo all of that. And of course, if I'm going to read it again in a month or something, I will probably forget. So I write all of that down, and then that helps me connect all of the pieces. But look for these ideas that will support you, and go to this link for an annotated bibliography. It's where we are looking at what we're reading and then we give our perception and our understanding of that. So for instance, I might read this and I might say, oh, well, I'm starting to learn about fair use. I'm starting to process, what idea that is. As you saw, I already had quotes in a previous slide where I said, oh, look, they quoted the constitutional amendment, Constitution and the First Amendment, and they made these connections for me that I couldn't have made because I'm not a lawyer. And so I wrote those things down in my slideshow, and they are definitely things I would include in my annotated bibliography. So find those strategies, but watch the videos first and then read the readings. And here are the viewings. So as you can see, we have a lot of variety. Some are 30, 35 minutes. So plan your time accordingly. Check for how many videos are in a week and make sure you're watching these. I'm learning so much from them, and I can only imagine how much more if I keep rewatching them. So aim to watch them and then do your readings, and then if you have time, to do a rewatch to get more ideas and insights. So discussions. Overall, they may be written and in video, but today in this session, we only have written ones. Hooray! So we are looking at our Get to Know You discussion. I'm not going to cover that because it's part of every single class, so you should be pretty good without me. Then I want to do a little bit of talking about the fair use discussion thread and our fair use assessment submitted assignment. So what does fair use look like? We have some questions. We've already looked at these a little bit earlier, but we don't have to be perfect about this. It's us starting to say, what is this? What do these words mean? How do they connect to what I want to do? Every book that you open pretty much has a copyright insignia. What's that going to look like when you want to sell your book or publish it, or when you want to get a copyright on it? What do those things look like? So we are essentially here just talking about all the things. What does it feel like? What are we thinking about? It could be a little confusing. So maybe start to think about a specific work. What would it look like for a book you're currently working on, or the one that you are thinking about working on? What would that look like in this process if it was gone? If someone picked up the digital copy, they hacked your computer, stole the digital copy, did a tiny bit of editing, and then sent it off and got it published. What would those things look like? How would you tackle that? Is that a fair use of your work? When people, there's a wonderful Murder, She Wrote, where a woman sues Jessica saying, you have stolen my story. And it ends up that this woman sues everyone. But that's what we look at in the videos. The gentleman discusses this idea of, there are basics to stories. There are princesses in need of saving. Tangled is not the same as Rapunzel, but it is, isn't it? And so when we look at it, we say, well, what parts are available to everyone? The idea that you have a book, that you have a protagonist, that the protagonist has adventures, these are things that are very typical. But how you do that and how you structure it and how you talk about it and the words and the language, that's what's going to make it specific to you. And so there are fair use items and not so fair use items. Our submitted assignment is looking at a sample and saying, well, did they or didn't they? So when we tackle that, because straight off the bat, I was like, oh, well, oh man, I found myself really hemming and hawing about the different directions, going sort of back and forth on a teeter-totter, a seesaw. Well, we have those clear elements, right? Purpose, nature, substance, quantitative or qualitative, economic effect, that's always a really big one. And of course, we have our Fair Use Balancing Act. This particular list is from the government website on fair use. So if you click on that link, you'll see good long paragraphs about each of these. But we're looking at not just the idea, but the expression of that idea. And we're looking at the purpose and character of the use. again, money comes in play. If it is for a nonprofit, for education, there are a lot of options I have because I am educating my students and I'm sharing with them. However, there's a big difference between state schools that are free or that are much cheaper or things like that, a community college, and for-profit schools. So the for-profit and non-for-profit makes a big difference even in education. So those different elements come into play. And of course, is this a published imaginative work? Is it, very specific? Is it just, a girl with long hair in a tower? Or is it a, Disney Rapunzel? Is it a Disney Tangled? Those kinds of elements come into play. And amount and sustainability of how much, that quantity and quality. If I take an entire song, do I have that right? Which then leads me to questions about cover bands, which is down here, and effects upon of the use upon the potential market for the original person. Will it harm that original owner? Will it hurt their market? Will it cause substantial harm? This leads me to our question. Did the person using the copyright material intend for the reader or viewer to mistake their new product as the product of the original creator? So essentially, did boldly suppose that readers would think, oh, this is by Dr. Seuss? Or did they take a fun, imaginative idea and they transposed it into their own creative work? Again, it's the sort of Rapunzel idea. And it goes to things like cover bands. I've heard wonderful cover bands in the past. What exactly are they doing with it? Why are some of them okay and others not? Is there an expectation? What exactly are we hearing? As you'll often see online as well, a person will grab a guitar and they'll strum a song and they'll sing it. And the song belongs to the songwriter, to the label, to all these different things. So, can they use it? How does all of that work out? And these 4 ideas are there. Again, it's not about you got the right answer. It's you looking at it and saying, what do I see in these kinds of ideas? How am I processing that? And then hopefully within that, you have some fun thinking about it. And of course, if you ever feel stuck, make sure you reach out and make me help.